and remind everyone that the peer calls, although they have a similar format to our webinars, are really supposed to be an opportunity for the community to learn from each other and to discuss and to share what you're doing in your agency or in your community. So I really encourage people to participate a little bit more and to be active in the discussion today. This is just a quick agenda. I'm Jerry Emanuel. I'm the Resource Center Manager and the host of today's call. And then with me are Deb Dauenhauer, National RTAP Review Board member and Executive Director for the Southern Nevada Transit Coalition, and Ernie Palmer, the General Manager of the Basin Transit Service in Klamath Falls, Oregon. And then I just put up again, because I'd like people to be active, a few questions to think about while our speakers are talking today. So with that said, Deb, are you on the line?
I am.
If you want to just walk us through your slides and what you're doing in your community, and I'll move the slides forward as you ask for.
Okay, great. I think a big part of our success in getting community buy-in and raising awareness is that we've established branding for our transit organization. We use branding on our vehicles, on our fare media brochures, letterhead, on just about everything that we have. You can actually see our branding to the right on the screen. It's Silver Rider. It's silver for Nevada being the silver state, and of course it has the outline of the state and of course a horse because we're in the west out here. That has really been a key to our success, because when you're going before different organizations and boards, either asking for general letters of support for grants or financial support, your time there in front of the board is very limited. So it's best to be established, and they know who you are when you're walking up. You have more time to ask specifically what you're looking for rather than trying to introduce who you are and what you do. Some of the other things that we've done, we have representatives that work here at Silver Rider, and we belong to local organizations like the Chamber of Commerce, the Rotary Club, Kiwanis. That's been very successful too. Not only does it allow us to network and get our branding and what we do out to other people in the community, it also actually increases our attendances at fundraisers. So it's kind of a dual purpose here. The other things we do, we attend city council, town board meetings, and a lot of us, we encourage our employees where they can and where they're willing to get elected or appointed to governing entities in the community. And that's really important, and I'll explain here in just a minute. We also engage in committees that have oversight in the communities we serve. Like the Public Works Department is a great example. That way we are aware of road closures before they happen, because obviously that affects transit. We do planning and zoning, have a lot of contacts there in our planning and zoning department, which is very key, because when new development is coming in, you know what's coming in, and they require the developer to meet with us so that we can work out bus stop locations that are what the developer wants and also which are safe and will work for us with line of sight issues. And finally, we participate in all community preparedness and emergency management programs in the communities where we serve. Going on with this, we identify community needs, and we find a way for our transit organization to fulfill that need. And I'll go on with some examples on the next slide. But that's a really important thing in the community. If they see that they can't imagine what they could do without you being there, how the community would operate without you being there, that increases your role in the community and how vital it is to the success of the community. We utilize all media in the community to raise awareness of what our services that we offer and anything that's going on, such as fundraisers. You can see there that we host 2 annual fundraisers, and that benefits our Meals on Wheels program that we have here in the two of the communities. We operate in 13 communities, but 2 of them specifically we run Meals on Wheels in. We run commercials, public service announcements, basically anything that we can beg, borrow, or steal to get time to get our word out of what's happening with the system. We barter transit advertising space on vehicles. I'll explain a program that's an example of our program, of our latest endeavor in that area. We cultivate relationships with major employers, and out here in Nevada, obviously, it's casinos are our major employers. so that they provide bus schedules and route media to new employees. So that gives us a good base of people who maybe aren't even aware, maybe they moved to the area and they're not even aware that there's a transit system here. And finally, we establish partnerships with the state and local agencies that provide services to residents of the community. So NSWD is Nevada State Welfare Division. They buy passes to get people back to work. And we have a relationship with them where basically it's like a sponsored trip, and the Nevada State Welfare Division buys passes, purchases passes from us that we then, with authorization, give to the client, their client, and our soon-to-be passenger. And the same as East Valley Family Services. They're another social service agency that are located in Las Vegas. So getting our bus passes to their clients is very difficult. Las Vegas is about 120 miles from here. Continuing on, we build community partnerships, and this is sort of kind of repeating what before, social service organizations, local businesses, finding those unmet needs. And we provide resolution to them if possible. Some examples are we have a strong partnership with our local law enforcement and our major employers. And one of our programs it's a non-transit funded program. It's funded by private money, but it's called the Stranded Traveler Program. And what it is it's a program we created to help with an issue in the casinos, our major employers, and Metro was having, which was an increasing homeless population. So what we have done is we've become partner with law enforcement and the major employers, and what the program does is we get referrals from those two partners, and they refer people to us who are homeless or maybe are in danger of becoming homeless, and we basically provide bus fare on Greyhound to be able to get them back to where they have a support system, basically their family. So, we verify with their family that they want them back, because otherwise all you're doing is just moving a homeless person from this community to another community. And currently that's funded by the United Way. So that's a really great example of how we're helping law enforcement. We're making their job easier, and we're helping the casinos because our major employers, because the last thing they want is have homeless people walking through the casinos where it's perceived to be uncomfortable with their regular patrons. River Run here is huge. It is an annual event held in April. It's a motorcycle event. And in our Laughlin operation, which is where River Run happens, we run 40-foot buses for our fixed route. And the last thing Metro wants is 40-foot buses on Casino Drive, which is our main drag, if you will, with about 40,000 motorcycles. So what we've done is they approached us, and what we do to be very creative is we have pulled the 40-foot buses off of Casino Drive, but we still have to provide service, so we replace them with smaller paratransit-style vehicles, and we run a continuous loop. So we're still providing service, but we're keeping the 40-foot buses off the road. And the same thing is with traffic issues. So those are the kind of things where if you can find out what something that an organization or a business needs, and you can figure out a way to help them, then they kind of become endeared to you, and they'll join your cause of furthering transit, expansions of service, letters of support, all of that. So it's a great way to get community buy-in. We coordinate with our local Social Security office, which probably seems kind of funny because you don't think coordinating the local Social Security office would necessarily work, but because our local Social Security office is down in Needles, California, we bring one bus load of people that need to go, and we contact the Social Security office, and they know who we're bringing on the bus, and they have appointments for them, so we can go make one trip down there to Needles, California, get everybody's business handled at Social Security, and then we bring them all back, because it's a long way away, and we would not be able to just do a more specialized service with one-on-one. It has to be a shared ride. And we do the same with our local chemo and dialysis clinics, so that we're bringing, they put their appointments, our passengers' appointments, one after the other or at the same time, and then we're able to be more efficient and provide the transportation. And it actually works great for our passengers, because then they know that they're, I don't want to say given priority, but their goal at the center is to get them out as fast as they can, because they know other people are waiting for them on the bus. I said provide services not traditionally performed by a transit organization. I gave some examples of like the Stranded Traveler Program. The Meals on Wheels, we coordinate with the local hospital. So when there's someone being discharged from the hospital, if they need Meals on Wheels, whether it be for a short period of time, perhaps they have lost their ability to drive while they're recovering from surgery, or if it's a long-term need, the hospital will call us, and then we'll coordinate with them, and therefore the local hospital depends on us as well. National Night Out transportation is transportation. I'm sure everybody has it, but we provide it, and we can, if someone can't afford the transportation, we have a United Way funded program that will pay for the transportation so that they can, themselves and their families can attend the National Night Out. Shop with a Cop, we do the same thing. We participate in all holiday parades and any and all other events in the communities. And these are some examples. Laughlin Town Fest, Key Club. We actually have the Key Club of the junior high school art class decorate our buses for the different holidays, and that's always a big hit. And I think, well, as I mentioned before, the key to all of this is engaging your community stakeholders is for the organization to provide as many transit and non-transit services, obviously the non-transit with non-transportation funding. But if you do as many of them as you can, the community can't fathom how they could thrive without you, and then they're very eager to support whatever you're trying to do. And the next slides, I won't go through them, but those are just some of our transit partners. The next slide is probably the one which is a great example of providing community support so that in turn comes back to you. We have they call it an international airport. It's pretty small here, but they're beginning service on February 16th for American Airlines. American Eagle is going to start providing flights into the airport here. So what we've done, we provide advertising spots on the bus for free. And that, to talk about the new flights, you can see on the left side of your screen. It's kind of hard, it's small, but we have the advertisement for American Airlines. And what we're doing is this will obviously bring increased ridership as more flights come in, because they're not obviously traveling by car. They're going to be transit dependent, either on public transit or on taxis. It's going to increase our fare box revenue. It promotes the new airport services, and it helps us by us being able to help the Mojave County Airport Authority, which is a nonprofit themselves, and they utilized our contribution as for when they applied for their federal FAA grants for air service. So I think that kind of summing it all up, the key to our success has been branding, and the other key is finding those unmet needs and seeing where you can help other organizations in the community, because then they're very likely to help you.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to get started, Deb. So stepping back a little bit, right, with this issue of kind of really engaging your community, and it's clear that you can go back through an awful lot of very different one-off services, right?
Yes.
And that part of that is how your transit has grown over the last decade or so?
Yes, we started in 2002 with about 18 employees, and we're now up to 108.
So I think one of the questions that I hear when I go to conferences and I talk to transit people would be almost, what's the first few connections you made? What really got you into the sort of the business of doing these one-off services and trying to get really involved?
Probably the first was the governmental entities like the city council, town boards. That was probably the first place. And then the second was the chambers and other social service agencies in our communities.
And were those just open memberships, kind of like a sign-up, or what was involved in kind of getting started working with them, with like the Chamber of Commerce, for instance?
We're members of the Chamber. I'm sure you could probably get involved without being a member of the Chamber. That would be something someone should call and ask. Here we have a large group of volunteers that I think they're called Volunteers in Action that will volunteer their time for the Chamber of Commerce, and that's another way you can get out and have some of your staff, if they're willing, or your volunteers that are your volunteer drivers or whatever, to go in and help that organization.
Okay. That's great. I also want to mention that my colleague Liz Taylor, who's on the line, has done an article on your advertising practices.
Yep.
That's on nationalrtap.org under the News tab in the Best Practices section, and you can read a little bit more about kind of in-kind bartering and some other things to leverage the bus space for advertising. So definitely of value for the listeners. And if you're on the call, please feel free, again, to ask a question or to share what you're doing. But I'll let you think about that for a little bit. And before we move into that, Ernie, if you're on the line, do you want to talk a little bit about your transit, the size in the area, and then what you do to really be involved in your community?
Certainly. First of all, I agree with everything that has just been said. It's a little bit bigger scale than ours. We only have about 30 employees. We've been around since the early 80s, but everything Deb said applies. I just add a little bit different flavor to it because we're in southern Oregon and we're a small rural community. And I think it applies to everyone, but in our community especially, it really isn't what you know, it's who you know. And we did many of the things that were described earlier. For instance, we don't have staff and volunteers to do it for us. The community outreach, if it's going to be done, is done by me, the general manager, because everybody else is busy doing maintenance or driving the bus, or as I like to call it, doing real work. But I've been, for instance, I noticed early on in the mid-90s, the county, and our service is about half in the city of Klamath Falls and half in the suburbs adjoining the city that is in the county. But I noticed the county needed members on its planning commission. And so I've been on the planning, I applied and got appointed to it, and I've been on the planning commission, for example, since 1995. And I agree with what was said. It's very, very useful because land use and public transit really go hand in hand. I'm also on a first name basis with all the planning department staff at the city. And it's very, very useful that I get notices from them regularly about pre-application meetings or site review or any of that stuff because I've made myself known to them. And again, it's important that I know all the politicians, and I do, but I really have cultivated professional relationships and friendships with staff people. And it might be, for instance, I'm good friends with the local street superintendent. So he is a friend of mine. If there's a pothole, I can pick up the phone, and the pothole is going to be fixed within a few days because it's a city street. And he knows me, and he knows that it's important to the community to have that done. There's other things that I would encourage people not to just think traditionally with government. I was involved with the Klamath Symphony as a board member for many years and got to know an awful lot of people. Again, it's who you know. Got to know an awful lot of people that probably aren't going to use transit, but they're among the movers and shakers in the community. And when you get to know them on a first name basis, it's a little bit harder to say no to someone you had coffee with and you're a friend with than it is to say no to a total stranger that might be coming to you cold or sitting out in the audience and you've never seen him before. I got myself appointed to the State Bar Citizen Review Committee for a while. There are other things in the legals. I know all of the judges in town. I know all of the attorneys in town because I got myself appointed to key positions. And I say got myself. I applied for it, and they were nice enough. I think everyone will find when it comes to looking for volunteers, the county, the city, the state bar, the symphony, it doesn't matter who it is, finding volunteers that are willing to serve is always a challenge for everyone. And if you have a skill or if you have a personality or if you have a willingness to serve, you usually can get appointed to these things, and you make a lot of people that may not be traditional transit folks, but they are the people that you need to know so that when you have, if they have something they need, they come to you and you try to find a way to serve them. But more importantly, if you need something, and oftentimes, and I've been here long enough now that I don't have to ask. Usually there's enough people in place that I've been dealing with for 20 years that will take care of business for me, if you will. They say, well, we don't want to close this street on this particular day because it's in the middle of transit service and it'll disrupt bus routes. So they would work in the evening instead. There are any number of examples. I think I've gotten more value in the long term as far as people being aware of the brand, being aware of our transit service, and offering respect to our transit district through non-traditional contacts that I have made, probably more than the public works director or the planning director or the city manager or any of those folks. We also get ourselves involved in review committees. We also, as was said earlier, we get ourselves, if we can, we volunteer and get on budget committees for the city or the county. And again, you have recognition and facial awareness. I try not to ask for anything from these folks unless it's critical. I've also been here long enough, and you might consider this in your state. Usually the State Department of Transportation will have a commission. They will have citizen advisory committees. If you get appointed to those, you find yourself sitting across the table making a decision on funding grant applications that have gone through. In our case, it goes through the Oregon Department of Transportation, and they have a citizen review committee reviewing and making recommendations on what should be funded. So recently we went through a process with state funding, and sitting across the table was the city and the airport director, and it was wonderful to be able to review their application and offer a voice of support for their application, which ultimately was funded. And those are the kind of friends that you can make by being a participant. The bad thing I would say is I was lucky when I came to Oregon that my children were grown, so we were empty nesters. So I've been able to spend most of my free time, I would say, on doing these types of things. It is time consuming. You can't get in for the short term. As I said, I've been on the Planning Commission since 1995. Once you're in, you want to show commitment. You want to be there. Clearly, you can't just become a participant and give people the impression that you're just there for what you can get from them. You have to give as well. And giving of your time and your intelligence and your honesty usually pays great dividends in any community, but especially in smaller communities like ours. So other than just support everything that came before me, I would just add that little personal note. It doesn't have to be transit related. It doesn't even have to be transportation related. Kiwanis was a great idea. I was the local Kiwanis president for a number of years. We didn't get involved in Rotary. We always figured that was for the owner of the business. Anyone that's ever been in Rotary or Kiwanis knows what I'm talking about. There's a friendly rivalry between the two that certainly is alive and well here. So give it some thought and get involved in anything, because it's amazing the number of people that will come to you and you've never met them before, and they say, oh yeah, Judge so-and-so mentioned you and said you were, well, hopefully they'll say you're a good person and not a bonehead, but it really will surprise you when you cast your shadow how many unrelated people will come back to you and they've heard from someone else that you're a giver and a participant in the community, and they're willing and able to want to help you. That's the end of that part of the sermon. Thank you for the opportunity.
Sure. Oh, thank you for talking, Ernie. So one of the things that I hear from both of you is that participating in your community is a good way to do marketing, and in particular to overcome the stigma of transit as being used by other people, or maybe not being a service that's valued by the entire community, right? So just having that face time, even if it's not at a transit-related event, is really important. Would you guys roughly agree with that?
Absolutely, I agree with that.
And one of the things that I'm hoping, since my goal for this call, the thing that would make me the happiest is if some of the listeners were able to go into their community and feel more comfortable engaging, either being appointed or engaging with other community organizations. How much of a time commitment is it usually to be on, the Friends of the Chamber of Commerce or one of these advisory boards? What should people be kind of expecting when they get into that sort of thing? Deb, you want to go first?
Yeah, I would say probably on the average, and that obviously fluctuates week to week depending on when boards, as Ernie said, different boards are meeting. But I would probably say 12 to 15 hours a week I could easily spend, most of it at nighttime after business hours, some of it during the day or early morning before, traditional office hours, if you will, if any of us have traditional office hours. But it varies. You can probably, as Ernie said, get as involved. Once they find out you're a mover and shaker and doer, they're going to try to rein you in to give you more stuff. So the time that they want of you is unlimited. You just have to focus where your most productive and lucrative efforts are going to be in terms of visibility in the community.
But I mean, like just getting started. And what are you doing during that time principally? Is that like meetings or reading or kind of keeping up on things?
Yeah, both. Mine. How I started all this was I was appointed to, much like Ernie, I was appointed to a town board, which is like a city council, and from there it just kind of expanded from there. But there was a lot of reading, but mostly I did the reading to educate myself about what was happening and what the needs were. Other people were experiencing non-transit needs in the community. But most of it, is like Ernie had said, is FaceTime, is getting your face out there so they know who you are when you walk in the room.
Okay, and Ernie, do you want to talk about maybe your experience when you were first appointed to one of these boards and kind of the time and what that time was spent doing?
Well, I agree that most of it, I agree with the time commitment as well. And I want to add to that never did I ask to be appointed or get appointed that it was Ernie from Basin Transit Service. It was just Ernie the citizen. And they found out quickly enough who I worked for and what my commitment was to the transit service. But I went in as a citizen trying to participate in my community and make it a better place to live. And I think, and I meant that sincerely, and I think that paid dividends. But 15 to 20 hours a week easily, and I agree that the downside is volunteers are in short supply, and they will definitely, the community, once they find out that you're a good person and you're willing to serve and you're committed, there will be more opportunities than you have hours in the day to take care of them. I'm also very fortunate that I have a board of directors. We have 7 elected board members, and part of their mandate to me is to stay engaged in the community. So I don't have to spend all of my time, personal time, participating, although I do spend a significant amount. There's a lot of business hour time as well that I'm allowed to participate in, whether it be the planning department or the traffic control board or the mayor's advisory committee, whatever it happens to be. I have the support and encouragement of my board of directors, and I would be remiss if I didn't say, as a general manager, you have to have that, and you have to be aware of it, because if you go off into the wilderness and are doing good things, it won't do you any good if you get fired or they refuse to renew your contract because they didn't have, or you didn't have their support, and that's what they wanted you to do.
Right, absolutely. It's very helpful to have an active and engaged board, and thank Deb for taking time out of her busy schedule to join us today as well as one of our board members. So I think one of the other questions we have, so Deb, you have a lot of different services with a lot of different organizations, and do they chip in for the funding of those, or are those things that you do on a fare-based revenue, or kind of how do you broach or kind of build that discussion when you see that there's something that you could be doing in the community?
Well, what we do is we go and to these different organizations and we find out what their unmet needs are in the community. Like the example I used, the homeless population, that it was growing. Not that we don't have homeless here, but it's a lot more controlled than it was a few years ago. So we created the program, the Stranded Traveler program, and then once we identified the need, we got an idea, my staff and I and the community leaders said, hey, this is what we need to do. And then I went out and found a funding source, wrote a grant, and pitched it to the United Way, or their local United Way, and they supported it, because obviously I can't use transit funding to start community-based social service programs. But those are the kind of things that really endear you to the community. And it's been a really successful program, and it's reunited families, people who haven't seen each other in years, so it's very heartwarming. A lot of times, I think, it would, what we do is, I say that we're a social service agency that has a heck of a lot of buses, and because that's how we do. We're so involved and intertwined in the community, and I think that's been a huge part of our success.
Absolutely. So we have a question from the attendees. What kind of experience did you have or are boards looking for, like town boards, when you're applying? And actually, I'm going to unmute you, Vanessa, too, if you want to elaborate or if I didn't ask your question correctly. Ernie, do you want to talk maybe about what these boards are looking for in a candidate?
Well, I think typically the professional credentials that one brings to their job as a transit manager or transit professional satisfies most of the criteria. I think I recently, well, a couple of years ago, became a member of the Area Agency on Aging, and the only question that wasn't on the questionnaire that I was asked during the interview was, why do you want to serve on this board? And I think, again, honesty and sincerity helps, and it has to be. I answered them rather facetiously. I am a senior citizen, so my answer to them was, well, I want to be on this board so that when I get to be old, there will be services in place I can take advantage of. And there was some truth to that, but it also caused them to chuckle a bit, knowing that I was tongue-in-cheek when I said it. But I think once you get started, and all you have to really do is get that first credential, whether it be a coach at the local Little League field, or someone that's serving on the Planning Commission, or they're a member of Kiwanis, you start putting those, if you will, on your, we'll call it our social service resume, and then you just approach these people with not what can you do for me, but I'm here sincerely and I want to make this a better community, and what can I do to help? And your agency, I want to serve on with your agency because I think you're key to the community and will really make a difference in making it a better place to be.
Absolutely. So just being willing to kind of step up is really the key credential.
Yeah, and in a small community like ours, and maybe even in the larger community, in a small community like ours, once you get on a committee and then you get on the second one, it's not too long that you see that all of we volunteers are kind of recycled on every stinking community throughout the town, because, again, volunteers that are willing to serve and put in time and serve sincerely are hard to find. So pretty soon you're on your third committee or your third board, and you're bumping elbows with people that you saw over in committee number one, because there's a small pool of citizens willing to provide that service. So you're going to run into each other on a fairly regular basis.
Sure. And then, you know, I know this is a significant time commitment, and you both really express that, but you also both mentioned that maybe some of your staff help out or also do sort of volunteering work within the community. Do you want to talk about how that happened? Were they volunteering before you, or?
Sure. If you want me to go first?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. What I do is, especially when we send, we have actually 13, we provide transportation in 13 communities in southern Nevada out of 4 different offices. So I have supervisors as far away as about over 200 miles. But what I do when we bring a new supervisor in, what I'll do is I will go to the community where the supervisor is going to be based out of, take them around, introduce them to the members of the community, much like Ernie is talking about, getting them involved in the community and kind of letting them see how I brought success to the other communities, and that way they become involved, they become members of the chamber, and they also serve on local boards as volunteers. So I think that's what is like. It sounds very much similar to Ernie's experience. And going back to the other question about the question on experience, what do you need to have? I think wearing your heart on your sleeve for the community is probably your best way. You're going in there honest. You're being an advocate for the community. You're finding a need someone needs, and then you leading the charge up the mountain and bringing others with you. And I think when you wear your heart on your sleeve like that, they know you're in it for the long haul. They know you're in it for the right reason.
That sounds great. I'm going to unmute you, Sam, if you want to ask your question. Good to go. Yeah.
Okay, great. So we have a lot of services that we would love to be offering, and we're really have found multiple gaps in our service because we only operate Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. So there are definitely gaps in our rural service. We have a population density of about 25 people per square mile, and that's the biggest struggle for us in offering these services, like a couple that we've created in the past year, is staffing it. We have a hard time getting drivers to even apply for the job. And so do you have any ways or methods that you could recommend to engage the stakeholders that are at our table to help us find drivers?
Ernie, you want to take this one?
Wow. I thought I was the only one that had that problem. With us, it's the requirement for a CDL that has really gotten cumbersome. We can't get CDL testing in our community. I take that back. Once a month, the Department of Motor Vehicles brings in a tester. It is really a challenge. I have no idea what you might do to attract more applicants to drive the vehicle or provide that service. We're a special service district, and our boundaries, we're a taxing district, property tax. So our boundaries are defined pretty clearly under Oregon law. So we're confined, if you will, primarily to just our service area, and we don't really get out into the rural area of our county very much. What we have done is to try and provide that service is we have partnered with other providers and worked with them to help them find funding so they could provide the rural service. For instance, we're very good partners with the local tribal government. We're also not only a member of the board, but we're very good partners with the senior center, and there's area services for people with disabilities, and we work with all of those folks. We're also a very good partner, by the way, with private transportation. So what we've done, because we don't provide the service out there, is we have found partners who could provide it. They just need a little bit of help in identifying grants, perhaps, or funding sources. We have donated surplus vehicles to those partners so that they might better provide the service. But your question fundamentally is, how do we recruit more interest in driving those services so you can provide them? And I don't have a magic answer for it. I think we've raised our wages over the years. We're a union shop, so we've negotiated higher wages, better benefits, so that we might attract people. But I fully appreciate that at some point you do a cost analysis and you can't afford to pay more than what you're paying, or you can't afford more fringe benefits, a better insurance package than what you're paying. And in that case, I would say it is what it is, and until you can attract quality people to provide those services for you, you're just stuck not being able to provide them at all.
Jerry, I have something to add if I can.
Oh, absolutely.
What we've been able to do with our major employers is when we're looking for people, we have a lot of open dialogue between the directors of HR at the different casinos and also the operations director of, we're a border state, Nevada obviously, but we're right across the river. If you're a baseball fan, Greg Maddox could throw a baseball across the river and hit Arizona from here. But we keep contact with the transit provider over there because a lot of times people's hours have been gotten cut because of fringe benefits and they're hiring part-time people only. So we have quite a bit of shared employees. And that has worked really well because I'll make contact with an HR director at one of the major employers and say, hey, I've got some openings for part-time drivers or extra board drivers, and they match us up with people that says, oh, well, my employee A who works in our transportation area picking up our casino clients needs extra hours. We just had to cut their hours, and then they turn them over and send them our way. So it's been very, it's worked well. It's enabled them to keep a part-time employee from, constant turnover on their end, and the same with us because now the person, while they have two employers, they're getting full-time hours.
That never occurred to me, and I love it. I'm going to try that.
Yeah, because it really works well, and it helps both agencies. It's helping the other transit agency or the employer, and again, it's community buy-in. It all feeds. I find that all of this kind of feeds into itself.
Thank you both for that. Your answers, I appreciate it.
All right, Vanessa, if you're still around, do you want to?
I'm still here.
Excellent. Please go ahead.
So my question was sort of following up on the engagement in your community through being on boards or community associations or what have you. And so I am a mobility manager in the Ann Arbor area in Michigan. And I'm in a network of mobility managers that we meet a couple of times a year, or a few times a year, I'm sorry, to talk about how we can identify resources in our communities to help our respective communities link folks to whatever services are available. And so when we're talking about community involvement, I'm sure that most of our senior managers are involved on some of these commissions and boards and whatnot, but as a mobility manager, I think that we would be better served if we were able to be a part of those groups as well. So my question for any of these panelists to answer is, in your agencies, do you encourage your staff that are not your, not your management staff to also engage in the community in those board member capacities?
Yeah, I do. In fact, one of my supervisors and her assistant, they go to all the town board meetings. They've been appointed to the boards. I think they take the direction like anything from the leader, and they have seen what the impact it has on the community and how successful our organization has become. And then they kind of follow the direction of the leader, and as long as the leader is willing, which is me, is willing to see, the benefit in that, and they have the support, then they buy into it as well.
So what you're saying then is that the CEO or general manager of the transit system has to have buy-in or see the benefit of that mobility manager or community liaison individual participating on that board or commission.
I agree, because then you have the complete support of the CEO. You have the complete support, and because, like Ernie was mentioning, once they find out you're on all these boards and you are not just occupying a chair, more and more people are going to come out of, organizations are going to come out of the woodwork and want your help. So it's imperative, I think, that you have the support of the person above you, whether it be a board or a CEO, because then, and it's going to get to the point where you have to pick and choose because you run out of time on helping everyone.
Right. So sorry, everyone else, without not taking up too much more time on this particular topic, but how would you recommend that a person in my position approach a CEO of a transit system to alert them to the fact that you're interested in participating and getting their buy-in to do that?
Oh, just pick up the call, pick up the phone, make a call, maybe meet them for lunch, you know what I mean, and do it more on a personal, establish a more personal type one-on-one relationship, and from there the professional relationship will flourish.
So is it better to join the board or the commission first and then let your CEO know that you've done this, or go to them for permission first?
I would go for them for permission first, because when you start doing stuff like that, there's going to be additional ad hoc committees. It's just not going to be limited to what you sign up for is not what you get. You end up spending a lot more time than you anticipated, and if you don't have that buy-in before you do it, then it's not, then you're going to end up joining a board, not being able to dedicate the right amount of time and be seen as successful if you don't have the support.
Thank you. I appreciate your feedback. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. So we've been going pretty strong for about 45 minutes now, and we don't have any additional questions. So if anyone does have a question, now would be a good time to either put your question in the question or the chat box, or raise your hand in the client. And I'll wait about 2 or 3 minutes for that and give our speakers a chance to take a breath. And we can either move forward for the other about 10 minutes we have left, or we'll let the call go there.
This is Ernie again. I want to stir things up a bit, I guess, by adding perhaps an unusual thought. One of the things that our previous speaker or questioner, I believe, said she was from Ann Arbor. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay. The reason, and that suddenly struck a chord with me, I wanted to say, Go Blue.
And I am a Michigan alumni as well, so thank you.
Oh. One of the things, believe it or not, that I have found that works incredibly well in this community, and I've used it at the state capitol and other places as well, is sporting issues and sporting events. There must have been I'm a big Oregon State fan, and in our state, Oregon State is kind of the underdog as the Oregon Ducks dominate everything, especially football and basketball. And I'm an Oregon State fan because that's where my daughter graduated, but we're originally from Michigan. So it's really amazing how I can walk up to a stranger in the grocery store that might be wearing a dreaded Ohio State shirt or blazer, and immediately, walk up and tell them that they're evil or give them some guff. The only way that sports fans can talk to each other, and or in a meeting, I can talk about being a Wolverine. I can talk about being an Oregon Beaver, and give everybody some teasing and some guff, and immediately you establish a very comfortable personal relationship with that individual, especially if they happen to be an Oregon Duck fan or they happen to be an Ohio State fan. They put it right back at you, and the next thing you know, you're almost friends. And if you bump into them again, it won't take long, and you will be friends. And those are just part of, I think, promoting the brand through. I said it was a wild thought, through the silly nonsense of sporting that resonates with an awful lot of people. And the next thing you know, you find out, well, the person that you were teasing happens to be the public works director or happens to be the district court judge or whatever. In fact, I do have a circuit court judge that's a Pittsburgh fan, and he and I yell at each other all the time. And we've become friends through that connection. So you never know what's going to connect with people or even a stranger, and it's all very beneficial and very useful when you have to put on your transit hat and look around for friends.
Absolutely.
That's my wild thought of the day.
So I want to actually segue that because I've done Deb a disservice. We do have her branding video that I'm going to try and play. I've never played a video before on one of these webcasts, so please have your hand on the volume. I don't know if it'll come out super loud, and hopefully it won't, but it's another example of marketing. and take a moment as well to say that National RTAP does have a marketing toolkit available under the Toolkits tab at nationalrtap.org that might also be of interest if you're looking for more marketing ideas. So here we go, and if it doesn't work, yell at me in the chat, I guess. I know both of our panelists had emphasized that it's important in the system, and I like the jingle at the end. So with that, if there aren't any more questions, I will thank you both for your time and for sharing your expertise, and thank everyone for joining us on this call. We're just about exactly at an hour, and I appreciate all of your time. There will be a survey that will go out tomorrow after the call about the call and about your satisfaction, and also really looking for feedback on what we could do differently and on other topics that you'd be interested in having calls on. So please do take the survey. It's pretty short and it helps us. Deb and Ernie, do you have anything else you want to say before I let you go?
No. If anyone wants to speak with me or email me, my address is on the RTAP website.
Great. And you can reach me directly. Go ahead.
Ernie, just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity. Coming from the best city in all the state of Oregon, and Oregon, of course, being the best state in the union, we appreciate the opportunity and wish everyone Godspeed.
Thanks, Ernie. Thank you, everybody, and have a good week and a good weekend.